In the early hours before sunrise, the skies over southern Lebanon lit up with flashes of orange and white. Within minutes, the silence of the night was replaced by the deep roar of fighter jets and the thunder of explosions echoing across towns and villages near the Israeli border. Buildings shook, windows shattered, sirens cut through the darkness. And by morning, one message had spread across the region. Israel had launched one of its largest strikes against Hezbollah in years. Reports began flooding in from Lebanese officials and international media. Dozens of locations had been hit: military compounds, weapons depots, command centers. Some sources claimed the death toll had already climbed into the hundreds. What had just happened was not a routine exchange of fire across a tense border. It looked like the beginning of something far bigger. To understand why these strikes matter and why the entire Middle East immediately held its breath, you have to understand the long and dangerous history between Israel and Hezbollah. Because this conflict did not begin last night, it has been building for decades. Hezbollah first emerged in the early 1980s during one of the most chaotic periods in Lebanon's history. At the time, Lebanon was already trapped in a brutal civil war. Militias controlled neighborhoods, foreign armies operated inside the country, and the government in Beirut had little real authority. Then, in 1982, Israel invaded southern Lebanon. The goal was to push Palestinian militant groups away from its northern border. But the invasion also triggered the birth of a new, far more organized force. With support from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a new Shiite militant movement began forming inside Lebanon. It called itself Hezbollah. The name means Party of God. Unlike many other militias at the time, Hezbollah quickly became more than just a fighting force. It built political influence, social programs, and a powerful ideological identity rooted in resistance against Israel. Over time, Hezbollah transformed into one of the most heavily armed non-state groups in the world. And it never forgot its central mission: confront Israel. Through the 1990s, Hezbollah fighters waged a steady guerrilla campaign against Israeli troops stationed in southern Lebanon. Roadside bombs, ambushes, and rocket attacks slowly made Israel's military presence increasingly costly. Finally, in the year 2000, Israel withdrew its forces from Lebanon after nearly 2 decades. For Hezbollah, this moment became a symbol of victory. But instead of ending the conflict, it opened the door to something new: a long standoff across one of the most dangerous borders in the Middle East. For several years, the tension simmered beneath the surface. Small clashes occurred from time to time, but neither side seemed ready for full-scale war. That changed in 2006. In July of that year, Hezbollah launched a cross-border raid into Israel. Several Israeli soldiers were killed and 2 were captured. Israel responded immediately. What followed was a 34-day war that devastated large parts of Lebanon and sent rockets raining down on northern Israel. Hezbollah fired thousands of rockets during the conflict, forcing millions of Israelis into bomb shelters. Israel responded with massive airstrikes and ground operations aimed at destroying Hezbollah's military infrastructure. By the time a ceasefire was finally reached, more than 1,000 people in Lebanon had been killed, along with over 100 Israelis. Entire neighborhoods in southern Lebanon were reduced to rubble. But despite the destruction, Hezbollah survived the war. And that outcome changed the strategic balance of the region. Instead of weakening the group, the conflict pushed Hezbollah to expand even further. Over the following years, intelligence agencies around the world began warning about a massive buildup of weapons inside Lebanon. Thousands of rockets turned into tens of thousands. Short-range rockets were joined by longer-range missiles capable of striking deep inside Israeli territory, precision-guided munitions, anti-ship missiles, advanced anti-tank systems. Many of these weapons, Israel believes, were supplied by Iran through a network stretching from Tehran to Damascus and into Lebanon. This growing arsenal created a new kind of threat. If another war broke out, Israel would face a level of firepower it had never experienced from Hezbollah before. And Hezbollah, for its part, made it clear that the next war would not look like the last one. Its fighters gained battlefield experience in Syria during that country's brutal civil war, where Hezbollah forces fought alongside the Syrian government against rebel groups and ISIS. Years of combat hardened the organization. Meanwhile, the border between Israel and Lebanon remained tense. Both sides watched each other closely. Israeli surveillance drones constantly circled above southern Lebanon. Hezbollah fighters built tunnels, bunkers, and hidden launch sites embedded inside civilian areas, each side preparing for a conflict that everyone hoped would never actually happen. But the pressure in the region has been rising, especially after the eruption of the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Since that conflict began, exchanges of fire between Israel and Hezbollah have become more frequent. Rockets fired across the border, Israeli airstrikes targeting Hezbollah positions, villages on both sides evacuated as the risk of war grew larger, and behind the scenes, intelligence reports warned that Hezbollah might be preparing for a broader confrontation. Then came the strikes that lit up the Lebanese sky. Israeli warplanes reportedly hit multiple locations believed to be Hezbollah bases and weapons facilities. Some of the targets were deep inside southern Lebanon. Others were closer to areas where Hezbollah leadership and command structures operate. Within hours, Lebanese sources reported massive destruction in several towns. Emergency crews rushed into damaged neighborhoods, searching for survivors under collapsed buildings. Hospitals quickly filled with the wounded, and early casualty figures suggested something alarming. Hundreds of people may have been killed. If those numbers are confirmed, this would represent one of the deadliest single attacks on Hezbollah-linked areas in years. But the biggest question now is not just what happened, it's what happens next. Because Hezbollah is not just another militia. It is a powerful armed force with tens of thousands of fighters and a vast rocket arsenal pointed directly at Israel. And historically, Hezbollah does not ignore attacks of this scale. Retaliation is almost always part of the equation, which means the situation unfolding along the Israel-Lebanon border could escalate very quickly. The region has seen limited exchanges before, but a full-scale Israel-Hezbollah war would be something entirely different. And some analysts believe that the strikes carried out in Lebanon may already have pushed the region closer to that possibility than it has been in many years. What Israel targeted, why these specific bases were chosen, and how Hezbollah might respond. Those answers could determine whether this moment becomes another brief flare-up or the beginning of a much larger war. By the time daylight spread across southern Lebanon, the scale of the attack was becoming clearer. Satellite images, local footage, and early intelligence reports suggested that Israel had not simply struck random locations. The targets appeared carefully selected, a pattern that pointed towards something much more deliberate. Several of the bomb sites were believed to be weapons storage facilities used by Hezbollah. Others were suspected command centers where fighters coordinate rocket launches and operations near the Israeli border. For years, Israel has warned about one particular concern: Hezbollah's growing stockpile of precision-guided missiles. Unlike older rockets, which are relatively inaccurate, these weapons can be programmed to strike specific targets with far greater precision. Israeli military planners have long argued that if Hezbollah succeeds in deploying large numbers of these missiles, the strategic balance could shift dramatically. Air bases, power plants, ports, and government buildings deep inside Israel could suddenly become much more vulnerable. From Israel's perspective, stopping that capability before it becomes operational has become a top priority. That is why many analysts believe the recent strikes were not just retaliation for border clashes. They may have been an attempt to disrupt Hezbollah's long-term military buildup. But hitting those facilities carries enormous risks, because Hezbollah's military strategy is built around deterrence. The group has spent decades sending one message: if Israel launches a major attack, Hezbollah will respond with overwhelming force. Estimates from Israeli and Western intelligence suggest Hezbollah possesses more than 100,000 rockets and missiles. Many of them are positioned across southern Lebanon, hidden in underground bunkers or mobile launch platforms. In a large-scale conflict, those rockets could be fired in massive waves. During the 2006 war, Hezbollah launched roughly 4,000 rockets over the course of 34 days. Even that volume forced much of northern Israel to shut down daily life. Today, the numbers could be far higher. Some Israeli defense officials have warned that in a future war, Hezbollah could fire thousands of rockets per day. Israel's missile defense systems, including Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow, are designed to intercept many incoming threats, but even the most advanced systems have limits. A large enough barrage could overwhelm defenses. That is why the possibility of retaliation is being watched so closely. Within hours of the strikes, Hezbollah officials began issuing statements condemning the attacks and warning that Israel would be held responsible. Publicly, the group often uses measured language. But historically, Hezbollah responses tend to arrive in calculated stages. Sometimes the response is symbolic, a limited rocket attack or strike on a military target near the border. Other times, the retaliation escalates step by step. The danger lies in how quickly those steps can spiral. If Hezbollah launches a large rocket barrage, Israel will almost certainly respond with wider airstrikes across Lebanon. And if Israeli strikes expand beyond military sites into major infrastructure, Hezbollah could escalate further. At that point, the conflict may no longer remain contained to the border, because Hezbollah does not operate alone. The group is part of what analysts often call the axis of resistance, a loose network of Iran-backed forces across the Middle East. Iran provides Hezbollah with funding, weapons, training, and strategic guidance. Other allied groups operate in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. In recent years, some of these groups have already launched attacks on Israeli and American interests in the region. If the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah expands, there is a real possibility that other actors could become involved. Militias in Iraq could target U.S. bases. Armed groups in Syria could open new fronts near the Golan Heights. The Houthis in Yemen have already demonstrated their ability to launch long-range missiles and drones toward Israel. Each additional player increases the risk that the conflict spreads far beyond Lebanon. And then there is the broader geopolitical pressure. The United States has repeatedly warned that it does not want to see a full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah. American naval forces have already been deployed in the eastern Mediterranean as a deterrent signal. Washington fears that a regional war could pull in multiple countries and destabilize an already volatile Middle East. European governments share similar concerns. Lebanon itself is in an extremely fragile position. The country has been struggling through one of the worst economic crises in its modern history. Banks collapsed. The currency lost most of its value. Many families are barely surviving. Another major war on Lebanese soil could push the country even deeper into chaos. For many civilians living near the border, the fear is already very real. Entire villages in southern Lebanon have been partially evacuated as tensions rise. On the Israeli side, thousands of residents from northern towns have also relocated further south. Schools have closed. Businesses remain uncertain. Families on both sides of the border are waiting, watching the news, trying to understand what comes next. Because the next move may determine everything. If Hezbollah chooses a limited response, the situation could still calm down over time. Diplomatic channels behind the scenes often work quietly to prevent escalation. But if retaliation comes in a larger form, a major missile barrage or coordinated attacks, the conflict could quickly expand into a full war. And that kind of war would look very different from the past. Hezbollah is stronger than it was in 2006. Israel's military capabilities have also evolved significantly, including more advanced intelligence systems, drones, and precision strike technology. A new war would likely involve massive air campaigns, cyber operations, and intense urban fighting if ground forces become involved. The human cost could be devastating. Hundreds of thousands of civilians might be forced to flee. Infrastructure across Lebanon could face widespread destruction. Israeli cities could come under sustained missile attack. And once a war of that scale begins, controlling its boundaries becomes extremely difficult. For now, the world is watching closely. Diplomats are working quietly behind closed doors. Military forces on all sides are on heightened alert. And across the Israel-Lebanon border, the tension hangs in the air like a storm that may or may not break. Because history has shown something about this conflict, it rarely stays quiet for long. The explosions that lit up the Lebanese sky may end up being remembered as a brief flare in an already tense standoff, or they may be remembered as the moment when a fragile balance finally collapsed. Right now, no one knows which path the region is about to take, but the next few decisions made in command rooms, underground bunkers, and government offices could shape the future of the Middle East for years to come.